Hello guys and gals, me Moodhar, and ladies and gentlemen, another video about the old Rockstar games. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today we're not going to just talk about GTA 6 leaks, because this plot thickens even more. Now, to understand, when we talk about what happened in the last week, obviously, if you're in the world of gaming, one of the biggest leaks ever happened. Now, to talk about video game leaks, alright, one has to go all the way back to the Half-Life 2 leaks, Back in the day, before Half-Life 2 ever dropped, ladies and gentlemen, a hacker by the known as Alex Gembe, a German hacker, actually infiltrated Valve's network, got access to their servers, and downloaded builds for Counter-Strike Source, Team Fortress 2, and at the time, Half-Life 2, ladies and gentlemen, full-on game. One of the biggest leaks at the time ever had actually happened. Now, because of this, Valve actually would suffer around $250 million at the time of a loss. Now, this person actually ended up getting arrested because at the time they ended up getting a fake call from the FBI about a job interview. And when they turned out it was really actually Valve, the feds and the German cops ended up catching the guy, got to their location, apprehended, and sentenced them to 4 years probation all the way. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to understand why I'm telling you the story, GTA 6 has been leaked, and without a shadow of a doubt, this is the largest video game leak of all time. There's a lot of stuff that's leaked, apparently. Obviously, you've seen the developmental footage if you've been following it, but you've probably also heard that there's insider builds probably stolen as well, too. And there's more to leak, as time goes on. There's a whole ransom being thrown around, and the person who's given it appears to be somebody well under the age of 18, probably somewhere around 16, if you will. Now, if that sounds wild to you, let's get into how this has happened. Now, if you've been following the GTA 6 hack, you probably have also heard of the Uber hack. Now, if you don't know, Uber is a service that you can use to basically, order a ride share and go from point A to point B, okay? I don't have to explain Uber to a lot of people, but Uber jumped in, September 16th and gave a security update. Now, of course, Uber has actually been compromised, and here they detail an Uber EXT contractor had their account compromised by an attacker. It is likely that the attacker purchased the contractor's Uber corporate password on the dark web after the contractor's personal device has been infected with malware, exposing those credentials. The attacker then repeatedly tried to log into the contractor's Uber account. Each time the contractor received a two-factor login approval request, which initially blocked access. Eventually, however, the contractor accepted one, and the attacker successfully logged in. From there, the attacker accessed several other employee accounts, which ultimately gave the attacker elevated permissions to a number of tools, including G Suite and Slack. The attacker then posted a message to the company-wide Slack channel, which many of you saw, and reconfigured Uber's OpenDNS to display a graphic image to employees on some internal sites. So obviously what had happened was somebody, of course, like they said, went to the old dark web, bought a credential, kept logging in, and obviously that the contractor's phone kept getting pinged. Now, normally, if your phone is getting pinged with two-factor requests, and you haven't tried signing in, that should force you to change every password across the board because you've been compromised. Accepting one of them, you're probably not accepting your own login, you're giving that login to somebody else. And when a hacker gets in to your account, they can do all kinds of nefarious things to you and the people that your account is connected with. So of course, they took some measures to identify the issue. They basically wanted to make sure the attacker was no longer accessing the systems and then to make sure that all of their security stuff was on point. So the impact for the Uber hack here, the attacker accessed several internal systems, and our investigation is focused on determining whether there was any material impact. While the investigation is still ongoing, we do have some details on our current findings that we can share. First and foremost, we've not seen that the attacker accessed the production, public-facing systems that power our apps, any user accounts, or the database we use to store sensitive user information, like credit card numbers, user bank account information, or trip history. We also encrypt credit card information and personal health data, offering a further layer of protection. We reviewed our code base and have not found that the attacker made any changes. We also have not found that the attacker accessed any customers or user data stored by our cloud providers, AWS, which is Amazon Web Services S3. It does appear that the attacker downloaded some internal Slack messages. So of course, they basically said that, don't worry, if you use Uber, your information is probably not screwed. Our stuff, our backend stuff might be. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, what's most important is who is responsible, which is where the plot thickens. We believe that the attacker or attackers are affiliated with a hacking group called Lapsus, which if we've never talked about before, we probably have in the context of other massive cyber attacks that have happened last year and just this year alone, which have been increasingly active in the last year or so. The group typically uses similar techniques to target technology companies, and in 2022 alone has breached Microsoft, Cisco, Samsung, Nvidia, and Okta. There are also reports over the weekend that the same actor breached video game maker Rockstar Games. Now, of course, Uber is working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Department of Justice to make sure that the people responsible for this, who, if they might actually be Lapsus, behind bars. Now, of course, to understand over here, this really does shed some light on the entire situation. So to understand, Rockstar Games has been one of many companies that has been hacked by this entire organization. For those of you who don't know who Lapsus is, they've gone through so many different hacks that's insane. So for instance, back in 2021, they attacked the Brazil's Ministry of Health. In 2022, they went to attack Okta, literally at the beginning of the year. Now, in Okta's situation, they actually did come out and say that this breach typically was relegated just to support engineer sections, which wouldn't have leaked a lot of personal information anyways. You can read their updated press release right here. Then they attacked Nvidia a month later, where they actually stole complete silicon, graphics, computer chipset files for literally all of their recent Nvidia GPUs. And that does include the 30 series cards, which are currently the most recent cards at the time of filming. And of course, if Nvidia did not open source those device drivers, they would just release all that information. And apparently they had the credentials for about 70,000 something employees. Now, of course, then they hacked Samsung literally a month later, where they posted a 190 gigabyte torrent file for all of their source code, some of that being for the Samsung Galaxy phones, which, for those of you who don't know, is Samsung's flagship property. Now, of course, then they hacked Mercado Libre, which is an Argentinian company relegated around e-commerce. And then, of course, they went to hack Ubisoft, which, of course, not surprising. Then, of course, literally within the same month, they attacked Mercado Libre, Ubisoft. They went to T-Mobile. And then, of course, after that, they went to Microsoft, all within the same goddamn month of March, where Microsoft was effectively hacked in about 90% of the source code for Bing search engine was stolen. Now, I'm sure some of you will sit there and be like, wow, these people are actually cracked, Muda. How many cyber attacks is that in this year alone? It's not about how many cyber attacks alone, it's about the targets themselves. I mean, these are massive mega companies, and really, their security is brought up into light. Now, I have to believe because of the pandemic, and because we're switched to a remote work environment, obviously switching that rapidly and that quickly has opened up a massive area of cyber attack possibilities. A lot of companies that used to work in closed boxes inside their own companies are now forced to share data across multiple platforms, Slack, Discord sometimes, various platforms that are susceptible to actually being hacked. And without proper hygiene on your cybersecurity, employees make some of the biggest mistakes possible. And that's where we're exactly looking into. So I guess the reality is how does a hack like this actually happen? Now, in the case of Lapsus, what they actually do is something known as spear phishing. Now, spear phishing is effectively when you target specific key members in a company. So, of course, in a company, there's tons of employees. You've got all the way from people at the very bottom, all the way to your CEOs at the top, your executive, operators. Now, of course, all these people have email addresses and point of communications. So once you have their email addresses, all these people have to do is create multiple emails, multiple phishing emails that they can send to all of these people. Now, granted, maybe a majority of them will not accept it, but there's probably going to be one boomer, one old person, one person that doesn't look too deep enough that'll actually bite the bullet, open the PDF file, open the compromising attachment, and effectively have their own system hacked or their credentials hacked. And once you hack one person's credential, you finally opened the barrier, and then you can start to work your way from there. And that's effectively what this company was doing. That's effectively what Lapsus was into. They were effectively gathering and using personal information and succeeding because they were so good at figuring out how to effectively spear phish these individuals. This is not like hacking in a movie where somebody sitting in front of a terminal typing like 300,000 commands a second. No, this is more like social engineering, finding out exactly how to actually hack somebody, how to hack an individual. Because here's the thing, computers are relatively safe. It's the person behind the keyboard, okay, the brain behind the keyboard, that oftentimes causes the biggest problem. A lot of these hacks happen because of severe human error or a complete oversight or lack of actually looking at things deeply. Because here's the thing, people make mistakes, people get complacent. And what'll happen is once complacency kicks in, these spear phishing attacks tend to work. Now, of course, you also have to factor in that a lot of these credentials, once hacked, sometimes won't even be used by the actual person hacking. These credentials can be sold on darknet marketplaces for, an amount that somebody will use to buy and then use those credentials to attack you. You know all those crazy viruses that we looked back when people were taking advantage of like the pandemic, sending like weird COVID messages around or really any shady message on the internet? Probably there are young people that are pretty more like that are like technically literate would not probably fall for that, but obviously you fail to account that there's people, who are older, they don't understand computers too well, that'll just blindly click on something that looks even halfway legitimate. And of course, no fault of their own. It tends to happen. Now, Lapsus sits around in the very large ClearNet that we have. For anybody that tries to find out what this group is up to, plenty of security researchers, all they do is go onto Telegram, which is one of the most popular sort of messaging services, secure messaging services, and you can find Lapsus's open group right there out in the open, where they basically talk about, their plans, successful hacks, and then they effectively will sometimes put up actual leaks on there. Of course, Lapsus is a very real organization, and it's so real that some of their members have actually been getting arrested, of course, in parts of the world. For instance, in London, around 7 people were arrested, and what's shocking is they were arrested between the ages of 16 and 21 years of age. Yes, the average age of these individuals is relatively young. I mean, under the age of 18, these people have a great degree of intellect, intelligence, and operability when it comes to computers and cyber attacks, enough to be actually targeting these mega massive organizations. Even if it's social engineering, there's no doubt that these people involved have a degree of intelligence around actually using proper scripting, around actually using proper methodology to intrude onto a network. So of course, looking into Lapsus, yes, it seems like a bunch of kids, one kid in particular, might have actually hacked into Rockstar Games, Uber, and plenty of these like massive tech companies. Well, a group of young individuals. And, because of this, it's really spiked them up so hard this year that now the FBI and all the federal agencies in the country and across the world are looking into their activities and tracking a bunch of them down. So, one of the things is I was reading around like maybe this person's going to get a crazy good job at Rockstar Games. And to understand, if you look back at the Half-Life 2 story, the hacker beyond it was given danglings of a job offer only to face time only to face like actual jail time. So do I think this person's going to succeed in the way that they think they are? I don't think there's any actual job opportunity waiting for you. The grim reality of these cyber attacks is not only do they cause massive delays and a lot of development, but they also cost a shit ton of money. If you think any of these cyber attacks didn't cost the companies anything, you'd be surprised. Some of these companies have lost millions, tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars in complete loss, which is why they're working very closely with organizations like the FBI to make sure this shit doesn't happen again. So yeah, it's really wild when you look into the entire story over here and the real finale. It really started with the GTA leak happening, but of course, when you found out the real agency behind it, and again, a lot of this is alleged. Who knows if Lapsus is truly behind it, but I would probably make a fair assumption that they are. And now that we find out these young kids have targeted all these organizations, I can only sit down and wonder when the wild ride truly ends. Lapsus is an organization that's put themselves at the top of the cybersecurity, like cyber hacking game. There's probably not any other organization as wild and well known as they are, unless you're talking about some nation state threat actor that's being watched by like the Department of Defense right now. No, Lapsus is one of the most loud and proud hacking groups. A lot of hacking groups will oftentimes stay pretty much on the down low, hack and steal all these things that they can, because they're in it for the money. But these guys are in it for the actual fame involved. This is the shit that they live off of. You know, the fact that they can claim they were behind some of the largest cyber attacks is a sign of pride for them. But it's that pride that eventually ends up kicking you in the fucking ass. And it's one of the things that I can't wait to see, ladies and gentlemen. Do I have any belief that this person's going to be found? I actually do. When this much money is cost and organizations as big as this are attacked, and you got the federal agencies involved, at some point or another, the wild ride truly ends. So yeah, that was the actual story of the actual hacker behind Rockstar Games. Seems as though they've also hacked Uber and all the other tech companies that you could imagine in just 1 year. Hell, in just 1 month alone, they caused a massive amount of shenanigans. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.